Hello, hello, and welcome to the From Nature to Nurture podcast. I am your host, Danielle, and I am here with our 17th episode. Today is a beautiful, rainy, cozy winter day, and I am bringing you a plant profile that kind of embodies the same kind of feeling. But like with my other plant profiles, I start with the medicinal, and then next episode will be all about the folklore and metaphysical properties of the plant. So stay tuned for more about that. Today we are talking about rose. Now there are hundreds of different rose varieties, so this is just a broad overview of the Rosa species. I always encourage you to try to work with your local rose if at all possible. I know here we have wild dog rose. In Tennessee it grows pretty rampant. But I mean, if you don't have a local rose or you can't find any, you can definitely work with cultivated roses as well. The medicinal properties change a little bit plant to plant, but they're kind of all very, very similar. So the Rosa species is wonderful and is a wonderful beginner-friendly plant because it has very low contraindications. Now, as we're looking at rose, sometimes it can be a little hard to grasp what it helps with physically because so much of the emphasis is placed on the energetic, the emotional aspect of rose, which definitely has strong validity in terms of affecting your mental and emotional and spiritual health. But there are some wonderful actions that this plant offers on our physical beings as well. So I want to do a brief overview of the herbal terminology just to remind you all and so you understand what I'm talking about. So first we have the herbal energetics, which is how the plant affects our tissue states and our organs and different body systems in terms of temperature, moisture, and tonality. So that would be if the plant is cooling or warming, and then if it is drying or moistening, and then if it is relaxing or tonifying. And so then we have the herbal actions. The herbal actions explain how the plant acts on the body. So let's get started with rose. Now we're going to cover the herbal energetics first. So rose is interesting because there is a bit of duality where it can do both in the body in terms of it is both drying and moistening. It is also relaxing and tonifying. Now, how this works is a few different ways. Sometimes plants work differently in their fresh state versus dried, but also with rose, we work with the petals and the rose hips or the fruit. So some of these work a little different in terms of the energetics. And then sometimes plants work differently in different body systems. So a good example with rose is that rose is very relaxing to our mental and emotional states, but it is also very tightening and tonifying to our physical bodies. So it's a really interesting combination of how we get these dual energetics to come together. So let's talk about how these energetics inform the herbal actions. Now remember, the herbal actions are how the plant affects our body. Now we have easy to remember combinations where if a plant is moistening, then it is normally going to have a demulcent or mucilaginous quality. That would be the herbal action under the moistening energetic. So primarily when we are looking at rose, we are normally looking at the main actions of it being a tonic slash astringent plant and inflammation modulation. Those are like the two main big hitters. We have more, but those are primarily why you will see it worked with. Now, how this works in the body is a few different ways. So that tonifying slash astringent quality helps to work in different body systems. So for example, the female reproductive system, which is inherently a wet, lax area due to the excess fluids that we release every month, plus regular secretions of cervical mucus and different things like that. So when it comes to tonality and astringency, sometimes it's hard to imagine what that looks like in the body, but I like to use the example of waterways. So we have many different types of waterways, but we have a wide, slow, lazy river, and then we have more of those like tighter creeks that have rushing water, maybe even a little bit of rapids in it. So, tonifying and astringent plants help to tighten and tonify these lax areas. So, how this would look like in the female reproductive system is if you have a really lax uterus, then maybe when you have your monthly bleed, it is slower, it is thicker, it is more sluggish and more boggy, swampy kind of a bleed, versus if that area is tonified. Now, when we say tighten, we don't mean tighten in the traditional sense. We mean like giving it like strength and structure. So if that area is tonified, then we will have a smoother flow, less blood clots, that nice bright blood. So that area just becomes more productive. The tonifying quality helps to lend more strength and vitality to that area so that it can do what it's supposed to do. Now, astringency works in hand with tonifying because tonifying is that tightening quality and astringency is that more drying quality. Now, this tonifying and astringent quality expands into many different body systems. So we have the female reproductive system. We also have the cardiovascular system. So helping with tightening and tonifying our veins and varicocytes, and helping to help our blood move more smoothly through our systems, and to help support our heart because of the blood affinity, and helping to strengthen our veins. Then we have our digestion, and this is where Rose can really shine because digestion is a really clear body system to be able to see herbal energetics. So where Rose can really help is when we have that hot, fiery, liquidy situation going on, when our stool is really loose, when we have like burning sensations, and these times when our digestion is kind of moving through really hot and fast and loose. Rose can help to tighten up those loose bowel movements, help to bring more structure and strength to our digestive system to be able to flow smoothly, make sure that everything's all the valves are opening and closing at the right time. The intestines are having enough pressure to be able to push everything through effectively, and especially specifically with the digestion, we also get a wonderful Rose help in terms of it being very cooling. So the cooling energetic helps a lot here, with, like I said, when we have like that hot, fiery digestion and things are running through too fast. This can also help in that same case of cooling the system down, bringing more structure and energy, and helping things to move back to the state of normal. Then we also have our respiratory system. Rose is a wonderful respiratory plant because of the same herbal actions that we've been talking about. So helping to cool any of those heated tissues and bring them back into balance, and that tonality can help to bring more structure and function to our respiratory system so that it can help improve our overall immune response, but also help us to be able to efficiently move through any issues that we're going through, helping to reduce inflammation, cool the heated tissues, break up that dry mucus and congestion, and help soothe the sore throats, while also helping to reduce any of the runniness, whether that's through our throat or through our nose, by that astringent action. Now moving on to its inflammation modulation. Rose is a pretty strong inflammation modulation plant, and it has been wonderful in terms of different digestion issues, because it already has an affinity for the digestive system, but so helping with Crohn's disease, IBS, food intolerance, diverticulitis, anything that gets inflamed very easily. Rose works really well with hypersensitivity, which is why it's a plant that I love. I have a lot of food allergies and I tend to be very sensitive, and Rose is a wonderful cooling, soothing plant. But like I said, it's kind of helping bring more structure and function to those body systems so that they can do their best work without me having to take something really strong to push them back into order. Now, I want to touch a little bit on the mental and emotional support that rose can offer. Rose is a really interesting plant because technically, based off of like the plant constituents and the science, there shouldn't be this benefit to our nervous system that rose has. So there is a herbal action called the nervine, which nervines help to support and balance our nervous system. And while rose is not a cut and dry nervine, it is often talked about as a nervine because of this kind of magical benefit where it just happens to help by reducing stress and bringing us out of our heads down into our hearts, helping us not to overthink things, helping us to make decisions through our heart space instead of our head space. And just in Western herbalism, there's no really way to describe it. In traditional Chinese medicine, sometimes it's called the Shen tonic, meaning that it helps to uplift and calm the spirit. But there's nothing really in Western medicine because it's not inherently sedative. It doesn't really work on the nervous system in the way that we think of. So I just wanted to mention that because it does have this physical impact on us. Like obviously our mental health and our emotional health can change a lot about our lives, which greatly impacts our physical being. And so I wanted to mention that even though it's not like a cut and dry herbal action or herbal affinity. And then we have the rose hips or the fruits. So these come in the fall time after the flower has gone to fruit if you haven't picked the flower. And the rose hips are commonly touted for their vitamin C benefits. You will see rose worked with a lot for the petals and the hips for skincare because of the cooling, the moistening, the vitamin C content, the inflammation modulation. Wonderful topical and internal plant. But the rose hips you'll see pressed for oils or put into teas or oxymels. I love it in oxymels. And they're not talked about as much as the flower, but they are wonderful. They have a wonderful bright citrusy taste. And so it is kind of nice, especially as we're getting into the darker, cooler months, to have kind of a fresh fruit in a way. Um, so wonderful option to work with there in terms of getting our vitamin C, adding a little bit of brightness. Because of the vitamin C and kind of like the sour astringent taste, it is more of a drying, tightening part of the plant versus, like I said, like the fresh flowers are really moistening. So kind of keep that in mind as you are making your blends. But yeah, another wonderful way to work with rose. Now, for contraindications, we don't have very many. We don't have any herb drug interactions there. I'd say the biggest possible contraindication would be since rose has an affinity for the female reproductive system and for some people can be considered an emmenagogue. There is a bit of a contraindication there for pregnancy. And then energetically, because it is a very cooling and drying plant, um, it could cause issues if someone is already exceedingly cold and dry. Now, let's talk about the fun part, the preparations, different ways to work with rose. So, I'm going to start with my favorites and then work down to some other options. So, I primarily work with rose in either infused oil, or a tea. That's just I like the flavor of rose. Some people don't. So if you don't like the flavor of rose, you might want to put it in your tea blends with some other stronger plants to kind of mask it, but I like the rose taste. So, I like I said I add rose to a lot of my different teas and I will do a quick to medium steeps just because those volatile oils can get pretty bitter, but I'm also really used to the taste, so it doesn't bother me anymore. So I'm normally doing like a 10 to 15-minute steep, if not longer, just because, like I said, I'm kind of used to it and don't mind. But if I'm working with the rose hips, those would need to be decocted because they are a tougher material to be able to break up. So that would be like a low and slow, at least 20-minute simmer to be able to break those down. You could also make a rose hip syrup, which is really good to add to different things. Add to different mocktails or food, or you can even add those into tea as well. And then for the oil, I don't heat my rose oils specifically. I don't heat many oils to begin with. I will put them in a jar and leave them for 4 to 6 weeks. I really love rose with jojoba oil just because jojoba oil is my favorite for skincare. And rose just adds a nice little subtle scent to it, and then I'm able to absorb the benefits through my skin, and then, like I said, be able to get like those topical skincare benefits in terms of like calming the skin and reducing any inflammation or any redness. Like rose is very cooling and calming. So especially if I got a sunburn or a bug bite or have an eczema flare up, or for those with rosacea or anything like that, rose is a wonderful addition there. Rose is often talked about for skincare a lot because of that cooling and calming affinity. So you will see rose oils. Now, the rose oils are normally rose hip pressed oil. And then you'll see like rose water and like different things like that. I love a rose water or a rose hydrosol. So lovely. Um, and then getting into some other different options, we also have infused honeys, delicious. We also have tinctures. Now, tinctures, if you are looking at a dried flower tincture, you're looking at a 1-to-3 ratio at 35% alcohol. Pretty low since rose is really delicate. But if you're working with fresh flowers, you would want a 50 to 60% alcohol because of the amount of water that's already in the rose petals. You can also work with the rose topically as a poultice, like for bug bites and stings and such. Just kind of mash it up with your mouth and put it on there. And there's just so many different ways. You can work with rose in cooking. You can put it in your bath. I love doing rose baths, so nice. You can make the rose water and add that into different things. You can do oxymels. Rose is really good in oxymels. Or different infused vinegars. There's so many different ways to incorporate rose, and so like with most plants, I don't work with a lot of plants strictly medicinally. I love to mix them into my lifestyle. So mixing them in with my skincare, mixing them in with my food, and so I kind of get this multi-layered herb relationship all throughout the day. And there's not a lot of plants that I just take strictly as a tincture for an issue. So part of like developing a relationship with the plant is by shifting your mindset and looking at it outside of what does this plant do for me, and to just kind of enjoy the experience of having this plant around you just like a person. Um, so those are some ways that you can work with rose. It works well in a lot of different blends. And it really depends on if you like the flavor or not. You can still get the medicinal benefits of it if it's still like a lower percentage in your tea blend, or if you have some other stronger tasting herbs to kind of cover that taste if you don't enjoy the florals. But just play around with it and see what you like. So that is where I'm going to leave this plant profile episode. The next episode that comes out will be a bit more about the energy of the plant and the folklore and the stories. So if that is interesting to you, stay tuned. That'll come out in a few weeks. I hope that you learned some more ways to work with Rose and that you find ways to incorporate her into your life. If you would like to find out more about my upcoming classes and offerings, you can find me at rootandwandercollective.com. I'll see you along the plant path.